it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We will be talking about running, mental health, youth sport burnout, specialization in sports, motivation, encouragement, coaching, parenting, sleep, nutrition, really anything that you can think of that we as parents or coaches or just runners can do to help our young athletes. Today, I get to talk with Lexi Kaz. She was a Division I soccer player during the height of the pandemic. So we talk about the unique struggles that were posed during that time. We also talk about her history in sports. We talk about some injuries that she had, the recovery from that. She also speaks on ultimately quitting soccer and then finding a love for the sport again. And then we get a little bit into what she's doing now because she is an entrepreneur and she has a really awesome business, but she talks a little bit about the process that she kind of went through to get to where she is now. So hopefully you enjoy our chit chat.
I guess if you want to start, because I realized all I know about you is you were a D1 athlete, but I don't even know what sport you played. So do you want to kind of introduce all that? And if you just kind of give your, like, how you got into sports and athletics and kind of your evolution that way?
Yeah, totally. Well, first, I'm just curious, what sport do you think it was that I played?
So for some reason, and I will tell you, and if I don't, sports, not my thing. Running is it. So when people say sports, the first one I always picture is soccer because that, okay. I was going to say, because that is like everyone at some point has played soccer in their life, right? So immediately when people say sports, just generically, I'm like, oh, right, it's soccer. And then I'm like, it doesn't actually have to be soccer. There are so many sports people do. So I'm glad we got it right.
Yeah, no. So I've played all kinds of sports, basketball, t-ball, flag football. I've always loved sports, but soccer, it was between soccer and basketball in high school. And then I remember I started to realize that I needed to make a choice. It wasn't because of like my family pressure, but I realized that if I wanted to go on the path to try and play in college, that I needed to make a decision. Am I going to pursue basketball wholeheartedly or am I going to pursue soccer? So I ended up breaking my collarbone in a soccer game. And that really gave me time to think on that question that I was, considering. And so after breaking that, that bone, it made me love soccer even more, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so from there I started, putting in that effort. Just looking back, it is so mental in terms of committing yourself to that belief of playing in college. And so, yeah, I worked hard. I worked, extra in the morning and after, and then continued to train and was getting recruited my sophomore year. And, while most kids, I'd say in my school, it would be junior year or beginning of senior year is when they started doing their college admission process, their college touring. For me, it was my freshman and sophomore year. So I felt, again, looking back, like I grew up differently and quicker in that sense, compared to some of my like peers. And so committed my junior year, which was, I was just ecstatic. It was awesome. And then a couple weeks later, I broke my foot, and that totally threw it threw me off in, many ways. I didn't know if they would pull my scholarship. They didn't. But yeah, it was a hard couple of months after that. But then I know that was a lot just in there, but that's kind of the beginning of my recruiting process.
So now, what age were you when you first were making that decision between soccer and basketball? Because I know it can kind of be so varied when we start to specialize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my sophomore year is when I broke my collarbone in a soccer game. So I'd say I was about like 15, 16. And yeah, I remember, or maybe it was my freshman year. I'm not quite sure exactly now that I think about it, but I just remember not knowing like how am I supposed to know where I'm going to go to school in in at 15 years old, while all my, friends are just enjoying high school or focusing on what's in front of them, I was thinking like 4, 5+ years in advance of the end result of that, of where am I going to play, and because I like to really analyze where I'm going to go, especially if I'm born and raised in California. I was looking at schools on the East Coast, in up north. So all of that was going through my mind in freshman or sophomore year, and yeah, it was very challenging to navigate that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I never had to do any of that like serious thinking, especially like going, I can't even remember making college decisions, but like, it was never anything that intense. Also, that's two serious injuries as a young person. Do you have any, like, do you remember what the recovery was like? I know that like recovering from injuries is easier. I'm putting that in quotes for younger people just because their bodies, are better able to usually recover from stuff like that. But I can't imagine mentally what that was like.
Yeah. No, it was really challenging mentally, especially. I think I've I've broken both my feet and my collarbone, in terms of like breaks in those types of injuries, and I've had a good number of concussions, and those in itself are a challenge as well. But the recovery process, yeah, was definitely mostly mental. Of course, I had to do my physical therapy and getting back in shape, getting fit, but I believe that the most important aspect of recovering from that was my belief that I would get better, and that I'd come back stronger. I think it either can make you or break you in that sense. I mean, that's how I felt for myself, that this is, the universe literally stopping me in my tracks. I don't have a choice in terms of what has happened. It's now my choice in how I respond to that. So after I broke my left foot, my junior year, like a couple weeks after I committed, that was the longest recovery. It took like 4 or 5 months to come back because I needed surgery. It's like a very specific break in my fifth metatarsal. So I just remember, saying to myself, I'm going to come back, better than I was before. And that was my belief the entire way. So I know that that's, the power of belief is so strong in athletics and now in my business, but that's what was really the key for me the whole time.
That is, I feel like that's such a mature thought for someone as a teenager. Like, and also, I mean, I'm sure now as an adult, you've probably processed like, oh, this is how I was thinking through all that stuff. But I mean, that is great because I feel like you hear so many young athletes, especially have some kind of injury and that long recovery process, whether it's surgery or not, but you had the surgery. And then just like, well, I never got back into sports because it just was too hard or my foot wasn't the same. So can you talk about, and maybe you went back and were like completely, you felt fine and great, but I know sometimes too is like you hurt something and you're like, I now have to realize how to move with the way my body is now. And did you have any of that recovering from those injuries?
Totally. Yeah. No, I broke like in middle school a bone in my right foot, but that recovery wasn't as, I mean, all breaks are very challenging, but that recovery wasn't as challenging in the sense of it was right when soccer had ended and I had time to recover. But because I had hardware, as the PT would call it, I really needed to relearn how to walk, to kick, to run, because there's a huge screw in my foot. So yes, that was definitely another challenge of, and I'm a righty, so that's my dominant foot. I did break my left, but it's your planting foot, in soccer. So most of my weight would go on that foot. So I had to, just more than anything, I think, build confidence in it again, that, I can fall or I can kick with it and it's strong. So yeah, and then I remember having a couple tournaments after, when I was cleared, and I just was so not in tune, like soccer shape, not in tune mentally with the game as well, because I'd been out for over 100 days. I remember counting, and that was a mental challenge as well. So I think just having, if I were to analyze it again, having more compassion for myself with the reintegrating myself back into the process, because eventually I kept with it. I kept, having that determination of I was a striker. So, I want to score goals, and it wasn't coming as quickly as I wanted to, but I knew that once I kind of broke the seal of that, and overcoming maybe the doubt of returning, then it would just continue to come. And I ended up scoring more goals with my left foot that season than my right. So I was very proud of myself for that.
Oh, that's so cool. So we got you to injuries. We talked about, young athlete, now you're in college, D1 athlete. Can you talk to us about that experience as well? Because I don't actually know. I ran very briefly in college, but I know it can be so intense being a student athlete. And I mean, that's about all I got. So I know it can be super intense. So talk to us about it.
Yeah. No, I was on that path. I graduated in 2020, the year COVID started. And so I didn't actually end up having I graduated high school in 2020. So I didn't end up having my 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 graduation, my end of club season. So a lot of that was stripped from us and our graduating class and our incoming freshman class. So it was a strange integration into that freshman year. And in the fall, we just trained. It was optional because COVID was at its peak at the time, and it was completely up to the kids if they wanted to come for the fall to train. It was voluntary, so did that. And it was nice to kind of get a feel, but then come back for second semester, and that's when it was really more of a challenge. It was every day going to practice and having games every single week, sometimes twice a week. And it's what I signed up for. I knew that going into it, but I don't think anybody can really prepare you for the mental aspect of it. I had heard from my coaches and from past D1 athletes that had already graduated and been through programs, but about the physical side, and you have to lift, you have to get stronger, you have to do all these things, but the mental health aspect of it wasn't really talked about, honestly. And if it was, I just didn't really get it in a way that I wouldn't have unless I experienced it. And so that was my freshman year, and I ended up dropping out about a year ago from playing. So I was also pretty brief as well. But I think that was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life, because of how much I love soccer and the pressure I put on myself to get to that stage. But I always told myself that I would only play until I stopped loving it. And in that moment in time, I did. And I knew that I needed to regroup and go focus on my mental health more than anything.
My mouse got too far away from the mute button. I had to chase it back. Wow. Okay. I guess I was just assuming that this was oh yeah, years ago when I played in college. So that is so recent. And I mean, this might be an obvious question, but I'm assuming COVID and all of that really also impacted the impact that all of it had on your mental health. Just because that has been so draining, I think, for everyone with the unknowns of all of it, right? So do you think that had something to do with you not loving soccer anymore? Were you just so drained? Were there some other factors? I mean, can you talk a little bit about if you even know what led you to just not be feeling like you can do it anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'd love to, because I think COVID definitely played a factor. I was in Zoom school for a year, and that had a factor as well. But I believe that, so all of those played a factor, but one of the most crucial ones for me was the environment that I was going to, in terms of my coach and how, she treated us. And I remember, thinking to myself after I'd made the decision to leave, or when I was still on campus, I remember saying to myself that I want to, I'm making a promise to myself that I want to change the culture with college athletes, because there is a kind of, what's the word? It's kind of normalized how some of the coaches treat their players, because it wasn't, I wasn't alone in my experience. And there was, I remember speaking to some of my old club teammates who had also gone to Division I programs, and it was the same script, but just a different setting. We had all experienced, yes, COVID had made it hard being on Zoom, depending on where you were in the country and the regulations at the time. But all of us, except one, had very challenging environments. It was very normalized to kind of treat your players a certain way that it didn't align with me. When, I had grown up with great coaches and encouraging environments. And I remember telling myself that I want to change this culture because you're supposed to love the sport that you're doing. And it's really just sad that that doesn't follow, at least in the majority of who I've talked to in their D1 college experiences, because there are some that do really enjoy their coaches and their environment. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved my teammates. They were the most beneficial, I think, aspect of it. And it was the hardest decision to leave them. And I adored them. It was just the environment that I had to go to every day that really took a toll on my mental health.
I did a recording yesterday with someone who works with people on like restoring body image and stuff like that. And we were talking about Alberto Salazar a little bit and the Mary Kane thing, and, just the way coaches are interacting with their athletes on any kind of level and how detrimental that can be. And whether they realize it or not, or they think that just is the best strategy. And I'd like to think, kind of like you're saying, changing the culture, I'd like to think that a harsh and impersonal and push kind of attitude is the old school way of doing things. And we are trying to evolve to be more positive and understanding, relating to people on an individual level. But whether you want to talk hypothetically or not, or just like tips for coaches, like, can you talk a little bit about some of the damaging things that coaches have done in the past that you've experienced, or that coaches do? And then if you have any advice, like especially because you're a recent athlete, from a recent athlete's perspective, on like different ways of motivating, different ways of connecting that we as coaches can be a little better at.
Yeah, no. I'd love to, thank you for asking that. Cause I think that was I value and valued so much when I was playing, my relationship with my coaches, because I love connecting with people, and I know that was a driving factor in why I loved soccer and love it still. I found that love again, but I think that I was, I was enjoying it as much as I was because of my relationship with my teammates as well as my coaches. And so when I was getting recruited, I thought I had that relationship with her, but then when I get there, it very much shifted. And I think one of the unfortunate aspects of it is she still, I've voiced, how I felt, and that, how you treat me is very different. Like how I respond, the carrot versus the stick can be completely different. Maybe that works for, one athlete, but it's not the same for me. And so what's unfortunate still is I think she doesn't really grasp that we didn't have that relationship that was working for me, and it was a large reason why I wasn't happy there. And so just understanding that every player is different, as well as just valuing that we're kids and we're people too, versus sometimes it felt like we're on a scholarship, and there was that pressure that they kind of put on us that we're paying for you guys to be here, and there's an expectation. So I think what really would have helped me was just having a more mutually, we want to succeed as well. I know that they, their job is important to them and they want to do well for that sake. But, I think that a lot of us would love to be there and just play better if it was more an encouraging environment of like, let's have fun. We can still, work hard, study film. We can still be professional, but I think that aspect of really the joy wasn't necessarily there as much anymore, because there was just that mistreatment of really valuing like the relationship. I think that's because there was the talk of, like, I care about you guys, but I think the actions, or I know that the actions didn't really back up that talk.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be so hard for us as coaches to picture what we're doing, and until someone points it out, and it's a bummer that it wasn't able to be perceived when you said you were pointing out the things that were and were not working. Not too long ago, I interviewed someone else, and they were giving advice on like when to share personal stories so that athletes feel connected to you. And it's just like some simple things that you don't always think about. So I love that you're able to share that. So we're able to just kind of have a little bit of a different perspective. You said you love soccer again. So I don't know if it was a conscious thing or not, but can you talk a little bit about how that turned to be, positive again and something that you enjoy doing? And then also I think briefly mentioned your business, whether it's related to any of this stuff or not. If you want to talk a little bit about what you're up to, would be definitely cool.
Yeah, I think what really helped was one, having some time apart from it. Usually when I would have time away from soccer, it would be forced, like an injury, and that sucked. But this was a conscious decision on my part. And I think that's what also made it hard because, it was my choice and I was the only one that could make it. But yeah, having time away, discovering other passions or being able to invest in other passions, I think really allowed that space and grace for my joy for soccer to come back. And I took a gap year this year, no school, just really focusing on myself and traveling and doing gap year programs. And I started my business and I started my own digital marketing agency. And I took a course that really just taught me like the tricks and the foundation of it. And that was about almost a year, coming up on the 1 year anniversary last August. And so that's really been just so cool for me because I've been able to monetize it, but also meet all kinds of people. And so connecting that to soccer and my competitiveness, I think putting that drive that I did, putting the same drive and focus that I put into soccer when I was getting recruited and when I was still playing at San Diego, I took that into my business and developing it because I know that consistency is what breeds greatness. And I don't know who said that. I'm pretty sure that's a quote from some author, but yeah, and being able to travel and play soccer, that also has really reignited my passion and love for it because it's such a connector sport. I really do believe that it's, the worldwide sport in so many countries. And so, yeah, both of those factors have played off of each other.
Yeah. And I love that it's so connected. And also it sounds so simple to be able to, like you said, take a gap year, you took a step back, you're able to kind of reevaluate, breathe, feel where you were at. But I'm sure that was a super hard decision. Do you have any, because that's all the questions I had for you about sports and all that stuff. Do you have any last thoughts or do you want to plug your business? So if anybody is looking for some marketing, we know where to find you, and I will obviously add whatever links in the notes.
Yeah, thank you. My business is AK Infinite, and we're a full service digital marketing agency that it really values long-term relationships, like I mentioned with you. So instead of doing one-time campaigns, which of course that's still an option, again, just like with soccer, I really value connecting with people and building their business as well as my own. So we like to do long-term relationships, whether that's doing multiple national media publications that we get you featured in, or multiple podcasts that we also do. So that's a little bit about my business. It comes from the name, comes from my tattoo. I have an infinity arrow. I got that. I got that when I was getting recruited, just because I saw it somewhere and it reminded me of the infinite potential I believe I have in myself and in life. So yeah, related to my business.
I love that. That is so awesome. And like I said, I'll definitely make sure I put all that stuff in the notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. I think that was, either whether it's relatable to people or it just is some food for thought, I think it is definitely going to be helpful to everybody. So thank you so much again for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Tori. I really appreciate your time.
Again, I want to thank Lexi so much for her time and telling her personal story. I think that it can be really relatable to others or just kind of offering a new perspective or some insight. So that was really great. I've linked her website and her book in the show notes. So if you want to find her and the things that she's done, that will be there. Also, just I mean, it was really a great interview, and I think we talked for like 20 minutes after we were done recording too. So it was just really fun to chat with her. So I really appreciate her time and telling her story. Thank you for tuning into Raising Runners. New episodes every Tuesday, and we are always looking to talk to people about running, mental health, or anything along the spectrum that can help our young athletes, or just talking to runners or parents and coaches of our young runners as well. Hopefully you find our resources helpful. If you have questions, comments, or anything else, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.